Hey, what's up, everybody?
What's going on?
This is Tony.
And I'm Jenny.
And we are Lido Loca, and this is the Lido Loca podcast.
Yes.
Episode 22.
Deuce.
Welcome back to the podcast. It's been a minute since we've sat here together, but there's been a lot going on.
There has been a lot going on, Tony.
Let me tease you about today's main topic. Now, Jenny and I, we've been several places cruising, and, we're ship people. We like to stay on the ship when we go to ports, but we have gone to many cruise ports, and so in today's episode, we're going to talk about our best port memories.
Yeah.
Our best port memories. But before we do that, let's take a spin around the cruise news. Since we talked to you last, a lot has changed. There continues to be cancellations of cruising. And one of our biggest cruises that we had planned for this year was going to go in October 2020, a Halloween, our group cruise. And that thing done got canceled.
It is no longer.
Jenny, was that the most depressing cancellation of 2020 for you?
I actually cried. Listen, there was a lot of sad ones this year that have canceled, and honeymoons and weddings, and that it breaks your heart. When I'm talking to the guests, but this one for me was pretty difficult. So, it was something that we've been planning and working and building relationships for 2 years.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's probably the longest we'd ever planned a cruise before. We announced that cruise on Cyber Monday, I think, 2018.
That's correct.
So sometime in November 2018. And booked well over 100 cabins and made plans, and it wasn't meant to be.
Nope.
Wasn't meant to be. But that's okay, and we find ourselves fighting back the cruise blues a little bit as we're waiting for cruising to resume.
A little bit.
Interesting, a lot. Interesting cruise news today, though. There do continue to be attempts for cruising to restart over in Europe, and the latest example of that is MSC just launched the MSC Grandiosa. They got approval from the Italian government to do sailings around Italy, and what they're doing is they've got some robust health protocols in place, and they are taking out Italians for cruising around Italy to Italian ports. So it's an all-Italian kind of vibe. MSC's an appropriate cruise ship for that.
Absolutely.
But we're recording this on the 16th of August in the afternoon, and they just took off on their first cruise in August a few hours ago. So we'll be watching that close to see whether or not they have any challenges, but cruising is resuming. So it's a big cruise ship. I believe it holds close to 6,000 people.
Oh, yeah. We'll be cruising along with them the whole week.
Vicariously, right?
Absolutely.
From a distance. They're not the only cruise line that's going to cruise out of Italy. Starting in September, a Carnival Cruise Corporation cruise line, Costa, will be cruising out of Italy. And so they will join some other European countries that have been cruising. TUI has been cruising in Germany since July without issue. And then there were some cruise lines that had issues. Hurtigruten in Norway had some challenges. And then an interesting story, Uncruise, a U.S. cruise line in Alaska, they were derailed by a positive virus test result. Mm-hmm. And then interestingly enough, the person that tested, so the way it went is they took a test at home that they brought with them from the cruise line. It was negative.
How many days before the cruise was that? Do you remember?
It was within 5 days.
Okay.
But the other thing is when you go to the airport in Juneau, Alaska, they also make you take a test.
Okay.
So they took the test there, but they don't make you wait for the result of that test, which seems like a challenge in that process.
Right.
And then so they presented their negative test to get on the cruise, but then during the cruise, 3 days after the cruise began, the Alaska government called and said that test in Juneau showed that they were positive for the virus.
Wow. So, and I'm sure at home, right? I'm sure they were secluded and, what did they call that?
Like isolated, quarantined.
Right. Self-quarantined for a couple of days before that ship. So what's interesting is they brought everybody back and they quarantined them and they gave them tests again. And now the test that was administered the third time came back negative just 3 days after the positive test. Wow.
So there's some concern out there. Some people are saying these are a false positive, but the guy who actually owns Uncruise gave a lot of support to the health department there in Juneau. Mm-hmm. He said he didn't feel like this was a false positive. he said that, you never know what's happening with this virus, and it would be irresponsible to say that they got derailed by a false positive. Now, it did end the season for uncruise. They were just trying to start off and get some cruising in. They said they'll probably lose about $2 million in revenue this year because of no cruising. They're just a small cruise line. But again, he's not calling it a false positive, the guy that leads the company. So he's just saying, hey, look, that's the way the process worked out. We did our best to get going, and it didn't work out. So
Right.
so that's the thing. We continue to watch these cruise lines and make their attempts, and now MSC is going to be the next one to do that.
Well, and so you got to think of timelines, right? So he was 5 days. It was 5 days before he left on the airplane. He became. So how far into the cruise was it?
Well, he took the test before he got on the cruise ship. He took the test when he got there, but then 3 days later, they notified them of the positive test.
Okay.
Then they still had to return home. So he was probably tested somewhere in the 4 to 5 day range after that airport test, and then he showed negative. And that's even what the uncruise guy said. He said maybe the virus load had changed, and
Right.
he had it, but then he didn't have it. Now, fortunately, nobody else on the cruise ship tested positive.
And the guy didn't say like he had symptoms or anything like that?
No, it was completely asymptomatic. So interesting stuff. Now, another interesting thing that's going on not too far away from us, I mean, if you consider 10 hours not too far away from us, is that the folks in Key West will get the opportunity to vote whether or not cruise ships can visit them.
Listen, when we went to the port of Key West, it was lovely. And yes, there are a lot of cruises that come in, and
So locals there in Key West, they were able to get enough signatures to put a referendum on the ballot that said, let's exclude large cruise ships.
Wow.
And the way that it was worded, it would effectively exclude most major cruise lines from stopping there. Now, the Harbor Pilots Association there in Key West, they sued to see if they could get the referendum removed from the ballot. Mm-hmm. And just this past week, a judge said, nope, it's a valid petition that they got signed, and so the referendum goes forward. So on Election Day, the same day as National Election Day, they will be voting in Key West to see if cruise ships shouldn't be there. Now, I'm not really 100% sure, like, how much money they make from cruise ships, but when we go there, the streets are filled with people off of cruise ships. So I would assume that it would have to hurt the local business, but maybe not. I don't know.
And then you got to think of too, right? Is the port in Key West, is that privately owned? And then can U.S. just override it because they have the Navy port?
Yeah. Maybe.
So I mean, just because Key West will vote on it, maybe it's just they're talking about that private port.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I don't know what the
That's true. The last time we stopped at Key West, we stopped in the Navy port.
Right.
So yeah, I'll have to look and see what the ordinance says, but it does seem like the council, the city, would be limiting entry into the city. So they probably do have the power to do that. Ships might be able to dock there, but maybe they have some say on whether or not people can get on or off.
Maybe.
It's going to be interesting. Yeah. I would think that the tourism is good for them, but they're saying no. And then look, they're not the only city. I don't know if it's an anti-cruise thing, but some cities, they just don't like the overrun of tourism. Famously, back in 2018, 2019, Amsterdam, they said, hey, we're not really getting much from cruising, and eventually cruise lines stopped going to Amsterdam. And then there's been some murmuring in Venice, Italy. Famously, I believe it was an MSC ship crashed into a dock there. And ever since then, and maybe even before then, people were saying we don't think these large cruise ships should be in Venice. They're putting the local tourism at risk and some of the old monuments and those kind of things. And so they put up enough of a stink that now MSC was going to go to Italy when they restarted cruising.
Right.
They're not going to go there now.
Very interesting. Well, listen, I think that, these are all ports that you want to go visit, but aren't there going to be other ports that may be small that say, hey, that big guy doesn't want you, but guess what we do?
Yeah, and it was pointed out. I did a video on this, and then it was pointed out that they can dock just a couple hours further than Venice, and there'll be all kinds of excursions where you can just hop on a bus and they'll bus you into Venice.
Right.
So I don't think that Venice is off the list, but I do think that at least stopping in Venice is there. And then more news that came out this week: Grand Cayman, who is the Cayman Islands, they're reopening to tourism in October.
Right.
But not cruise ship tourism. They made the announcement they will not accept cruise ships in 2020. They will reevaluate for 2021. Grand Cayman's one of those places they don't have a port there that can accept cruise ships.
Right.
So that's one of those places that you have to do a tender service anyways. But again, these are people saying, we don't feel like we get much from the cruise ships, and with the current health concerns, no thanks.
Okay.
So it's going to be interesting. I bring these up to say it's a trying time for cruising. Bar Harbor, Maine didn't want the small cruise ship. I mean, there's a lot of ports that aren't necessarily willing to accept cruise ships, and I think it's a challenge because you have an industry that definitely wants to restart. You've got a lot of people that have a lot of stake in it, a lot of jobs. You got a lot of people with a lot of pent up demand for vacation that have gone through this stressful time, that maybe didn't lose their job, that does have the money that they can go on vacation. And cruising's their favorite form of vacation, and now some of their favorite ports are not accepting people. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens as cruising restarts.
I agree. I guess I'm a little confused, right? So couldn't they just have, when the cruise ships come in, couldn't they just have like the temperature scans that they have at the airports?
I think they can, but I don't think, I think overall, I don't think people trust the temperature scans to be that reliable, especially if somebody's asymptomatic. They're not necessarily showing the temperature. One way that MSC is combating this is they're only, you can only get off the MSC cruise ship with a ship excursion, and you can't wander off by yourself.
Okay.
So, the idea, the concern is this: what if a cruise ship shows up with people from all over the world or wherever, and then they bring the virus into our community? How do we control that? A lot of people are answering the how do we control that question by just saying they can't come.
Right.
MSC is trying to get around that a little bit, of saying, look, we'll just take care of it. We'll make sure that our people don't come in contact with any of your people. I don't know how that's going to work. Right. But that would be interesting, right? Could you imagine being in a country on the ground and they'd be like, no, you can't talk to them, or no, you can't go there. That would be an interesting way to cruise.
Right.
So it could happen. But yeah, I don't know. I think the list of cities that are not going to be excited to get cruise traffic is going to continue to grow. But there was one story this week, the tourism minister in the Bahamas, somebody who's been critical of cruising in the past. Now that guy is saying, bring them on down. But the interesting thing about the Bahamas is many of the cruise lines, they put their private islands in the Bahamas. Right. And so this tourism minister's going, no, we don't want you just to go to your private islands. We want you to come to the population centers and spend your money too. So it's going to be interesting as it starts up again.
Isn't it going to be interesting? Right? Like maybe all these ports that don't want the cruises to come in, and a lot of cruises, they either love Nassau or they don't like Nassau. And a lot of people stay on the ship at Nassau because they've been there before. But maybe there's going to be a newfound love for Nassau.
Yeah, like if that's the only place that you can legit get off, maybe that will reignite people's desire to go to Nassau. But that could be a smart play on their part too. Let's make this if we're going to be the only place that takes passengers, let's make it as enticing as possible.
Well, and they're also going to have to make it. I don't like to use the word safe because everybody's safety is their own, right?
Right.
Like you have to be aware of your surroundings and know what you're getting into, right? But I feel like these ports are going to have to do a better job in the coming months, that we do get back to these ports on safety.
Yeah.
Because it has been very hard hit with tourism and it's a little worrisome sometimes, a little bit.
That's interesting. Like if a port that you go to has a reputation for crime, right? Now you're going in a situation where the economy may have been depressed anyways because of the pandemic, right? And will it be less safe or more safe? That's going to be interesting to see how local governments deal with that, because I tell you what, if all of a sudden a port on the first couple visits of a cruise ship turns out to be fairly unsafe for passengers, cruise lines won't go there, I don't think.
I know.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So we got some port cities that are not accepting cruise passengers, and we did have a couple cancellations happen this week.
Yeah.
Seems like every week we get a couple more. A big one though, Holland America Line, that's a Carnival Corporation cruise line. They've extended their shutdown until December the 15th. Now,
Right.
Princess Cruise Line, another Carnival Corporation cruise line, did the same thing. And so it's interesting to see some of the cruise lines inside that Carnival Corporation family extending the shutdown. Some people say this might indicate that, all of them are going to move till December the 15th. I don't know that I believe that yet. So no cruising because of CLIA until November the 1st.
Right. And, demographics are a little different on Holland and Princess.
Yeah.
So maybe Carnival as a corporation, the demographics are different on Carnival Cruise Lines.
Yeah, I could see that happening. I could see all the leaders of the cruise lines have said, look, we're not going to send every ship out as soon as possible. It's going to be a phased reopening. It's going to be a staggered reopening. Why not take, like you said, the demographic, the statistics, whether you believe them or not, but the statistics that people are working with here is that older people are more susceptible to the virus than younger people. And then traditionally, the average age of the cruiser for, just say, Carnival Cruise as opposed to a Holland America, it's different.
Right.
Carnival skews younger, HAL skews older. And so, yeah, maybe let's take the cruise lines where the demographic is older, push those out, and then let's see what we can do with just Carnival in November. I think that's what's going to happen. And, Carnival's got, 25, 26 ships. I would be surprised if 5 ships sail in November. I'm not throwing November away yet. Like, they're going to have to cancel November for me, but I could see a scenario where just a few Carnival cruise ships cruise and maybe nothing else, at least from North America.
Yeah, I love your positivity, but I kind of just feel that it might be 2020.
Could be.
Yeah.
It could be.
And I'm with you. I'm not gonna give up faith in that it's gonna be happening soon. Until of course they call it, but I don't know.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I don't want to see anybody get sick. And if cruising is not a safe endeavor, right? If it's determined that cruising is unsafe, then I certainly wouldn't want anybody to go cruising. But if we go through a couple cycles in Europe and they prove that these health protocols can, create an environment where you can cruise and not be any more susceptible to the virus than, say, at home, then I say cruising should go forward. And, in that circumstance, and say the CDC doesn't extend the no-sail and that CLIA doesn't extend their no-sail, it would be cool to see a few ships go out because you got to start somewhere. Right. It's just like, to your point, the question is, when does that start? Does that start 2020 or,
Well, I think it's just a little...
or 2021, I mean.
The sports arenas have closed. I think it's the social distancing that is worrisome for a lot of people. But if the cruise lines, don't fill to capacity and really take those precautions, I mean, it's not going to be any more dangerous, I think, than going to the supermarket. That's
really what I hope the cruising in Europe proves out, so that we can get it going here again. If it's safe. Again, if it's not safe, I don't want anybody putting themselves in danger.
And we also have to get ready for, if that is the case, that it cannot cruise at capacity, that the cruises may be a little bit more.
Yeah. I've been asked,
and I'm okay with that.
I've been asked that question, like more in cost, right?
Absolutely.
I do think cruise costs are going to go up, especially if they can't sell at full capacity. I think they'll try to make. There'll be a breaking point, though, right?
Right.
Like it's like any other business. They're going. The whole goal of business is to charge as much that people will tolerate paying, right? And so I'm sure they'll test that point. Like, okay, well, let's push it. And then they'll get to a place where people won't pay, and then they'll back that price back down. But I think what you're going to see for sure is a swing up on how much people will pay to get on the cruise ships.
Well, and I won't say what cruise line, but I was booking a cruise on one of the cruise lines for late 2022, and every other cabin was available.
Oh, okay, so they were distant. They were, yeah. That makes sense.
So, which is good,
for
right?
2022.
2022, right? So, which is good, because then by the time 2022 comes around, maybe they can throw in those other cabins. but it was very interesting for me to see what they're already starting to do.
Yeah, and I'm glad they're doing that. I mean,
absolutely,
because what would be worse is if they booked that full ship and then had to cancel half the people off. That's some of the concerns with cruises that are still on the books, say in November, December. Hopefully along the way they've tried to thin out the amount of people on those cruise ships.
Right, and I think they have.
Because that would be a worse cancellation if all of a sudden now cruising is going to happen and your cruise ship's going to go, but you're one of the unlucky people that get kicked off of it.
Right, and that was a lot with our October cruise. I just kind of felt that it was already a sold-out ship.
Yes.
As much as I wanted it to go, I was pretty sure that it was not.
Right.
Just because it was, a sold-out ship.
And weird stuff was happening.
Yeah.
Couldn't book it. So not until they won't sell again until middle of December if they sell. And then Viking Cruises, both the Riverside, the Oceanside, they just said, no, we're done with 2020. We're going to go to 2021. They're not a publicly traded company, and so maybe their announcement doesn't hold the same weight with stockholders as other companies. Sometimes you feel like these publicly traded ones are staggering their cancellations so they don't wreck their stock price, that kind of thing. That's speculation on my part, but Viking said very specifically in their statement that we're a private company. It doesn't really matter. We've just decided we're not going to cruise until 2021.
Yeah. Now, Tony, going back to your Alaska story with that cruise line, I have a question. So it was going to take. So the cruise line didn't even. They didn't test. It was the airport. Is that correct?
They required a test from somewhere.
Okay, but that's where he got it from, was his home.
Right. And then just to get into Alaska through the airport, they make you take a test.
Okay, so that's the one that came out positive,
yeah,
but was not required.
By the crew. Well, no, I mean,
because the cruise line wanted the one that was from the house.
Well, yeah, they just wanted one. Right. I think if you could have got an instant test at the airport, maybe they would have waited to go to the airport.
That was my question to you. I think, or I feel, and I probably would feel more comfortable, right, when if you took that test as you were getting ready to board or something like that. But my only thing with that is, say you're traveling, 10 hours to get to this cruise port, and then you get turned away.
Right. That would be the worst. I mean, that's going to be the risk, right? There's going to be risk and reward when it comes to returning to cruising. MSC is going to be requiring tests to get on their cruise ship, and I think they're paying for the test, and I believe they're going to be giving them before you board. I got to check that to make sure. But to me, the safest way that this would work is if the cruise lines could offer rapid testing at the point of embarkation.
I agree.
I don't know if the technology is there yet. The testing, is there yet. But to me, that would be the best case scenario. If you had a reliable test, and look, nothing's going to be 100%, so you got to pick some number, whether it's 90%, 95% accurate, something like that. I don't know what the solution. I do think that's the biggest hurdle that the cruise line, you're going to have to test before people get on board.
Right.
And I think 4 days in advance may be too far because, like I said, you could get exposed. But yeah, that's going to happen. Like, part of the health protocol is if you look sick or, if you failed that temperature scan or whatever, you might not get to cruise.
And I think that it's going to be something that's going to need to be in the contract, right, between the guest and the cruise lines, whether, because quite honestly, you say you're paying $2,000 for a cruise and that's just a throw out number. But say you have $2,000 on the line. So somewhere in that contract, it should say, hey, if this test comes back that we require and the health department is requiring, and you get turned away, you can have a future cruise credit for that amount. Not that they're just going to lose their money because nobody's going to cruise. Yeah,
I don't think that'll be the case. I think they will do a future cruise credit or some sort of refund if you get turned away.
Right.
I don't know what that means for airfare and that kind of thing, but
I don't know, but it definitely means that you should be definitely getting trip insurance.
I haven't looked at trip insurance much since this whole thing. I wonder how that's going to change. Yeah. Like, I do believe that they're not going to cover the virus.
No, but I mean, that would be a cancellation.
Yeah, if you have cancel for anything, maybe the more expensive insurance.
Yeah, so within 14 days.
It's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's a look at the cruise news. Let's kick over to our main topic. Let's talk about some of our cruise port memories.
Yay, let's talk about something exciting.
Oh, the cruise news wasn't exciting for you.
Well, I mean, it makes me sad.
So the main topic of the day, port day memories.
All right, let's get into it.
The interesting thing is I didn't realize I had as many port day memories as I did until I started writing them down.
I know.
Really makes me miss that cruise life.
It does. And, you know, what a beautiful way to make memories and just explore and travel. Travel is such a beautiful thing.
It is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
We got to get back to it.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you this.
Ask me. Go ahead. Fire away.
Tell me a memory.
So,
Yes.
and these are in no order because every port was my favorite, you know.
You love them all.
I love them all. But one of my favorite times was when we were in Freeport, which many people don't like to go to Freeport. We didn't really do an excursion. We just sat at Senior Frogs that overlooks where the ship comes in, and there's little shops, and it's really just a nothing. But that was one of my favorite memories, was your brother getting up on the stage, and was it a light contest that he was dancing, or
It was just a dance contest.
it was just a dance contest for a shot or something like that.
Yeah, we all got free shots anyway, so I'm not really sure what the prize was, but I think it was just to whip the crowd up into a frenzy. But yeah. So this was the third cruise. We were on the Carnival Liberty, and yeah, it was just a nothing stop in Freeport. The Senior Frogs right there, and it was awesome.
Yeah, it was just kind of cool to, you know, I feel like when you're on a cruise, you kind of forget about your everyday life, you know, on land.
Yeah.
So it's like you just kind of can cut loose and just have a good time. And it was really just lovely to see him and the Queen just kind of chill and just enjoy life.
Yeah, that's what we call my sister-in-law. She's from Germany, and we call her the Queen of Deutschland.
The Queen of Deutschland.
The Queen of Deutschland. All right. Well, mine in no particular order. I've written down the Parrots of San Juan.
Ooh.
So on our MSC Seaside cruise, that was the first time we met our friend Don Terrace from Don's Family Vacations.
Yeah.
And one of our port stops there was an evening stop in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And Don and I ventured out. You let the boys loose on the town.
Absolutely.
And we ventured out and we wandered around San Juan, and we came upon just a little square where there was somebody who had a bunch of birds, a bunch of parrots, and they would take pictures of the parrots with you for a reasonable $5. These people took 20, 30 pictures, plus we took video. And it's one of my favorite memories. Like, I haven't had a lot of animal encounters, so that was really like my first cruise animal encounter.
Right.
And I just a great time. Not only seeing the parrots piled on me, but also piled on Don, and it really kind of kicked off a love that I have for San Juan. And so parrots in San Juan, the Parrots of Puerto Rico. One of my favorite port memories.
Yeah, and in that same port, in that same visit to that port, I had walked you guys off the ship.
Yep.
And there's a little park as you get out of the cruise port itself, where a lot of locals just kind of sit and music is going, and it's just really lovely. So it was really nice for me to be able to sit and chit chat, watch their everyday life, and watch the sunset in the port.
Yeah.
And there was two beautiful ships in that evening. So it was just really pretty as the sun went down to see the lights on the outside of the ship turn on, and it was lovely.
It's interesting because, one of my favorite aspects of cruising is being able to go someplace but not have to go through some of the stress of trying to travel to a place. Now, I know some people do that better than others. The great thing for me about the cruise ship is you have a limited amount of time. It's a good thing and a bad thing. It could be a hindrance in some places. I know I felt that in other cruises. A lot of times for us together, we just like to get off and explore the port the first time that we've been there.
Right.
And so when you were saying that, when you're talking about, just hanging out by the port, we've done that in several places. We've done that at Ocho Rios, and we've done that, at Grand Cayman before. So I completely connect with that.
Yeah.
What else is on your list?
All right. So my next thing that I just loved was Havana.
Havana, Cuba.
Havana, Cuba.
What did you like about Havana?
I think that it was just lovely being able to pull in, and that what was that statue called in the harbor?
Oh, I don't know, but yeah, it's like the
statue of Jesus.
It's a Jesus statue, right?
It
It's very similar to the one in Rio de Janeiro, but
Yeah.
I don't think it has the same name. But those actually face each other.
I mean, it was just beautiful, and I got super emotional because, you know, part of my heritage is from Cuba, and you know, I heard a lot of stories as my mom was growing up as a little girl that she would go visit her grandparents there. So I just I had all those emotions going through me, and just knowing that my people were from there.
Right.
You know, and then to see that it didn't change from what my mom had remembered, because she would vividly tell you those memories, was just absolutely, it overtook me.
Yeah, Havana and Cuba, that trip to Cuba was really not what I expected.
Right.
That was like the first, I thought I knew what something was going to be, and then it really wasn't that. I went to Cuba as a tourist, and then I came away from Cuba as like, I don't know, it just reminded me how hard life can be sometimes.
Right.
And that sometimes that you forget that. I was really moved in Cuba. We went to Revolutionary Square, where really the people that led the Cuban Revolution, where that happened as young people. And you know, those people turned out not to be really great for the people of Cuba. That revolution turned out to be really hard on the people of Cuba. But being there in Revolutionary Square, like, you really got a sense of like the history of a country changed in this football field size parking lot, and it was heavy. Like,
and that never changed.
Yeah, yeah. It looked the same. The wild thing is, before we went to Cuba, I watched the documentary on Cuba that had, you know, film footage from the 1950s and 60s, and we saw the places that were in that documentary, and they looked exactly the same.
Yeah.
It was crazy. The other thing I did like in Cuba, though, like, you know, we went to the Christopher Columbus cemetery there. Christopher Columbus was supposed to be buried there, but he wasn't there.
That was also our first overnight port.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we slept on the ship, but we were there overnight.
Yeah, and we got up the next day and went back to Cuba and went to the money exchange. And
yeah, and that whole sailing, I know this is getting off a little bit, but that whole sailing was wrapped around our itinerary.
Right.
You know, like, there was a lot of Spanish food and flair on the ship.
Yeah, it was one of the first cruises that were allowed to go to Cuba. I think it was
Right.
the second time they went to Cuba, since it was legal to do that. We were on the second cruise there, and so yeah, the night that we were in Havana, they brought local musicians onto the cruise ship, and the show that evening was those local musicians, and
Yeah.
it was pretty cool.
Let me ask you this: would you go back if they reopened?
Yeah, I would. I mean, all these places that I've been, I would go back, because I really just go, like, the first time I go to places, I'm really standoffish, and I just want to check it out.
Right.
Right. Just take a lay of the land, that kind of thing. And then, you know, after I've been to a place, I'm like, okay, when I go back, it's going to be more meaningful, you know, because I'll do more of that kind of thing. And that's not been true for, you know, like, another one on my list is, you know, going to St. Martin and ATVing all over the island. That's about
Right.
as much, that's as kind of adventurous as you can get, you know, taking an ATV to Mahu Beach and that kind of thing. So, but Cuba, yeah, I wasn't super apprehensive. The only thing we did, though, was the, you know, the bus tour. But I think now if I went back, I would explore on my own a little bit.
Yeah, I agree.
I think so.
What do you have next on your list?
You know, I've got a couple things. I'll pull them together. You know, we've been to St. Thomas a few times.
Right. So beautiful.
And so there's a few highlights in St. Thomas for me. The first time we went to St. Thomas, we did exactly what I was just talking about. We just got on a bus and they drove us around. We ended up on top of the mountain at the banana daiquiri place.
Oh, yeah. That was so beautiful up there.
And the cool thing is, yeah, that was overlooking Megan's Bay, world famous Megan's Bay. And so that kind of set the scene to go to Megan's Bay.
Yeah, that's what we said was the next time
Yeah.
we come, we are going wherever that's at, that's where we're going.
And that's exactly what we did the next time we went to St. Thomas. We went to Megan's Bay and spent the day at the beach, and it was amazing. It was one of the prettiest places I've ever been. And then the very same day we took cable cars up the mountain where you could overlook the cruise ships.
Oh, yes.
So yeah, I mean, St. Thomas is a beautiful place. It's part of the American Virgin Islands, and probably the prettiest port that we've ever stopped at. Do you remember the first time we went there? You know, where you dock, it's like full of sailboats. We ate breakfast on the back of the cruise ship.
Absolutely, it was just beautiful.
And then, but some of the stuff that's on my list that's a lot of fun is, of course, the stuff that we do together that has to do with the animals. And you know, I'm thinking of when we went to Monkey Jungle in the Dominican Republic.
Oh yeah, with the spider monkeys.
With the spider monkeys, and of course when we went to Daniel Johnson's sloth and monkey place
that was lovely
in Roatan.
I did not enjoy the iguanas though.
I can't remember what the name of that iguana farm is, but that you didn't like the iguanas. No. But what do you think? What's better? Do you like the monkeys playing on your head, or do you like hugging the sloth better?
I think I like the monkeys jumping on me.
That monkey jungle experience was really neat. Something happened on that trip that had never happened anywhere else before. But in the monkey jungle, of course, we got to feed them, but they delayed us a lot. Like we got there and we had to wait for a long period of time. And that was the first time that we ever got back to the cruise port after the time that we were supposed to be there. And we were afraid that we were going to miss the ship.
Yeah. And I mean, we were on an excursion through the ship.
Right.
But that still doesn't mean that they're going to wait for you.
No.
Right? It just means that they're going to get you back to the ship.
They're going to get you back. Yeah, that's true. That's right. That doesn't mean the ship will wait. It just means that they'll get you back. Fortunately, that day, I guess all the excursions were late.
Yeah, it was a very weird...
Because there were hundreds of people waiting to get back.
Yeah, it was very stressful towards the end.
Waiting to get back.
Absolutely.
What else is on your list?
So one of my favorite ports also, and it was... I think it was on our first group cruise, but we went to Half Moon Cay.
Yes.
And that was the first time that I've ever seen water from the ocean that you can see the ground, see the bottom.
Right.
And it blew me away, the color of blue. I've never seen that with my own eyes anywhere.
It was beautiful water. You really could see all the way. And we've been to a few beaches, and that one there at Half Moon Cay is super nice.
Yeah, that was beautiful. We're not really beach people, but that beach was beautiful.
Half Moon Cay was interesting. I feel like that might have been the first private island that we spent some time at. I don't know if we went to Half Moon Cay before Labadee, but Half Moon Cay was the first time that we actually ate the ship's buffet on the island, or the barbecue that they had. It's pretty interesting. It's one of the prettier places, and of course they've got the man-made pirate ship there. And I'm interested now to really go to Perfect Day at Coco Cay.
Oh, I can't wait.
That kind of thing. But yeah,
here we come February.
Here we come February. Yeah, this is something we could go on and on about. Now there are a couple memorable ones that we have to mention. I'm going to mention a few that you weren't with me on. I took that trip to Asia. There's some pretty special things. Eating sushi in Tokyo. I know that. It seems very cliche, but that was really cool. Going to the temple there in Tokyo. Going to Dotonbori Street in Osaka. Just going to Shanghai Disney. Those are things that I just can't believe that I got to do. That's a whole world apart. But I would say probably some of the most memorable port experiences or port memories for me and us together revolve around Key West, Florida.
I agree.
Probably the most famous or infamous port memory that we have is the first time that we went to Key West, Florida. And if you've been around, you know what this story is. But, we were on a tour on a bus. A gentleman told us that, there's DJ's Clam Shack, the best lobster roll in the country, and you got to get it. We hesitated to get off the bus, and then eventually we walked to DJ's Clam Shack in a walk that was super unpleasant.
It was 100 degrees out.
We were not happy with each other. We were fighting. And then when we got to DJ's Clam Shack, the place was closed.
And then we were fighting again.
Then we were fighting some more. And then the cool thing is we had our redemption story. We were able to go back to Key West with the sole purpose of getting a lobster roll at DJ's Clam Shack.
I know.
We took the bus tour, and this time we knew exactly where we needed to get off.
We took the same bus tour.
Same bus tour.
We knew exactly what stop it was.
We rode it for an hour. We got off at the stop, and then I had forgotten to bring any form of payment.
Yeah.
And so we did not get our lobster roll again. And so I think that's the biggest memory. We have a lot of good memories. That's probably the most gotcha, oopsie kind of I can't believe that happened memory.
Yeah.
But I will always have a special place in Key West. And that's why, I mean, of course, we could drive down to Key West now, but I think it's like 10 hours from here.
Yeah, it's a long drive.
We could drive down to Key West and get our lobster roll, but I still hold out that one port memory that I'll have in the future is getting off a cruise ship in Key West, Florida, and going to DJ's Clam Shack and having that world famous lobster roll.
DJs, we're coming for you.
We're coming for you.
And what's great is that so many of the Loca fam have indulged at DJs and say it's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. We've turned a lot of people on to something we've never tried, and the report that we get back is that it is good.
It is worth it.
Worth it.
Worth the fight to get it.
Absolutely. So those are some of our best port memories. It's not an all-inclusive list because we have a lot more. I would love to hear some of your port memories. Shoot me an email at tony@lidoloca.com. Maybe we will read a few on the next podcast. Now, we do have a small list of port memories that are our worst port memories. We're saving those lists for our Patreon listeners. You can support the podcast. You can support La Lido Loca by joining us on Patreon. We put some exclusive extra content over there, and if you want to get a postcard from us monthly, that you can do that on Patreon. So we would encourage you to come check that out. But if you want to hear our list of our worst port memories, make sure you check out Patreon for that. Another way you can support the podcast is to book your travel with La Lido Loca. Jenny will be glad to help you. She's booked thousands of cruisers, and in what is really a challenging time, not only for travel agents, for cruisers, Jenny has gone the extra mile a lot to figure out this whole rebook process, refund, future cruise credit process. She's helped hundreds of people get their cruises rebooked, and she would be happy to do it for you. So whether it's an existing cruise that is being canceled, or whether you just need some recommendations on a new cruise, a future cruise in 2021, 2022, you can reach out to Jenny. She'll be glad to help you. The best way to do that is through email. Jenny, what is your email address?
It is jbarnette@expediacruises.com, and it's jbarnette at expediacruises.com.
Well, thank you guys so much for listening to the show today. If you are listening to the podcast, please consider giving us a review on iTunes. Drop some stars on us. Or if you're watching this on the La Lido Loca podcast channel on YouTube, leave a comment, leave a like. Let us know that you're out there listening. Thanks again so much. My name's Tony.
And I'm Jenny.
And we are La Lido Loca. And until the next time,
we'll see you on the Lido.
We'll see you on the Lido.
Bye.
Bye.